All right, so now we're going to dive into subject lines. So this is a pretty critical part of your newsletter because 33% of emails are opened based on the subject line alone. And the subject line can determine whether or not your email is marked as spam or not. So we're going to talk through sort of best practices for subject lines, and then we'll get to some things that are spam triggers in subject lines. So hopefully this will get your emails opened. So 77%, I mentioned this earlier, of consumers prefer to receive marketing emails or marketing via email versus another platform. The average consumer opts in to receive emails from over 9 different brands. I know my number is way higher than that. I don't know if y'all feel the same, but 9 seems low. And then the average office worker receives 100 emails a day. 80% of people delete their marketing emails immediately. So in such a crowded inbox, a subject line is the way to get your email read. That and the from field, which we're going to talk about at the end of this section. Those two things are the most important things, obviously, because that's what they see, to getting your email opened. So your subject line must be relevant, interesting, and genuine. And this whole relevant and genuine aspect is actually part of the laws that we're going to be talking about in a moment. Your subject line of your email must accurately reflect the content of your email legally. And the penalties are pretty high. So that's not just a suggestion, you have to do that. Less is always more. Simple and direct works best. In fact, generally any email server that you're using is going to cut off your subject line at 55 characters. But a lot of phones are going to cut, if they're looking at the email on their phone, it's going to cut it off after 30 characters. So keep that in mind. So if you go over 30 characters, make sure that you front load your subject line with the most important information to make sure that it's not going to get cut off. And you want to start with action-oriented verbs. So all of a sudden it's sounding like resume and CV advice. But here it's more like a demand, or like you're telling them what to do. So check out blah, 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 or look inside for blah, blah, blah. So if you're telling them what to do, they're more likely to open it somehow, which feels like I would rebel and not want to, but apparently most people like to follow instructions like this. And then avoid complex language, because of course, if it's hard to understand, they're not going to open it. They don't want more of that. They don't want more of complex language. So keep it simple, and try to get all of the most important information in the first couple words, first 30 characters, and don't exceed like 5 to 7 words or 55 characters maximum. All right, you also want to, so this is some like ideas. You don't have to do all of these all the time. Actually, some of them you want to use sparingly, but here's some ideas that if you use them, they tend to up your open rates. So one thing you can do is highlight any offers or incentives that you are including in the email. So you might say, like, if you're offering a free MP3 to folks or whatever. Create a sense of importance, scarcity, or urgency. Use this sparingly though, and genuinely, because again, you don't want to go err on the side of clickbait. But today only, don't let this expire, you're missing out on blah, 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 whatever it is that people feel like, oh, I need to open this right away. Make people feel like they're VIPs, they're insiders, or they get exclusive content in your subject line. So like that first example on the slide, get exclusive access to blah, blah, blah. Because you are going to give people content that no one else is getting. So highlight that aspect in your subject line. And you can include personalization through a merge tag in your subject line. And I've got some statistic on that. I think it's, oh yeah, I remember it. It's 18, so 12% of this one study had a 12% open rate for emails that did not include a name in the subject line, and it went up to 18% for including the name in the subject line. So that's a 6% jump from 12 to 18 just for including the name in the subject line. So that's a good tactic. Maybe not all the time, but sometimes you might try that out. Or, hey, let's say I put location on there as well, and I forgot to mention it, but let's say you're going to be performing in a certain location and you know you have a large subscriber base in that area. You might say like, hey, Phoenix, performing, you know, at blah, blah, blah this weekend, or whatever it is. So you might do a merge tag for like the location for a certain segment of your audience, or hey, you know, Tucson, right? Maybe you're performing all over Arizona or something. And so you can do a merge tag for their city and put that in there as well. So depending on your needs, merge tags can come in handy for subject lines. Oops. There we go. Another tactic is to ask a question in your subject line. So you want to keep this, you want to be as specific as possible. And this is kind of a lame one, but it's what I could come up with. So have you ever seen an installation like this? And the installation makes it specific. You wouldn't want to say like, have you ever seen anything like this? Because that'd be more likely to get marked as spam. So the more obscure it is, the more likely it's going to be marked as spam. So you want to keep it specific to you. And maybe there's probably a million different examples that would be better than this one, but that's what I came up with. You can also share relevant or seasonal or trending topic insights. You can even share like it with a hashtag if it's got an associated hashtag, as long as it's in line with what you do in your brand ethos. So for instance, hashtag dance every day with me and new releases. So if that's something that's been going around, you can integrate it there. You can highlight any educational content that you provide in your newsletter. And if you do that, words like learn, discover, and maximize as your action verb tend to perform pretty well. Use numbers and data in your subject line when available and relevant. And you can also use a cliffhanger technique. Again, this is something that should be used sparingly. And actually, ellipses can be a spam trigger. So you might sort of see how that performs for you, or just maybe avoid it if you're worried about it. But the answer to my most asked question, but yeah, maybe use the ellipses sparingly, or maybe if be aware that that could be a spam trigger. All right, and then the last thing is that there's a study that, you know, for millennial audiences, emojis have been shown to increase open rates. Now, if you look at the actual percentage down there at the end, 56 of brands using emojis had a higher open rate than brands that did not. So that's not actually that big of an improvement. Like when I put it on there, I was like, oh, that's great, 56%. But that means, you know, 44 did not, right, see an improvement. So that's actually not that big of a difference, but it does. The reason why it does seem to have the edge of using the emoji in the subject line is because it makes it more distinctive. So people can sort of pick it, draws their eye to that email in their inbox. And it sort of adds a human element, an emotional element to the subject line. And it makes it more memorable to them, is what this study found. So you can decide to use them or not. I actually linked, it's actually from MailChimp, but they put out the most used emojis. They do that for like the past year, and it's the most used emojis in subject lines. So you can actually see what's commonly used in subject lines. And of course, that would be based off, you know, some lots of people that use that platform. But overuse of emojis will get you flagged as spam. So it's just a balancing act with emojis, with hashtags, with ellipses, any sort of punctuation you're putting in your subject line. All right, did I want to say anything about, yeah, we're good there. All right. And like a lot of other things we've talked about, I just wanted to note that subject lines, the success of your subject line in terms of your open rate will come down to you, your specific brand, and your specific audience and what they like. So it's, for that reason, critically important to know who your target audience is and what they want and what grabs their attention and what they find relevant, and highlight that in your subject line. And that's just going to take some trial and error and some testing. So we already talked about A/B testing, so I won't go over that again. I have a link to things that an article that's talking about different things that you can test with your newsletter. So things like subject lines, from fields, content you can test, time that you're sending your email, all kinds of things. You can test with different segments of your audience and see what's the most effective for you. And I know that I said earlier, like, your content needs to stay consistent month to month. That's the most important thing, is that it's consistent. But there is going to be some like flex time at the beginning where you're figuring things out and you might have to change things up to best serve your audience. And really what I mean is, once you get a good formula and get it down, stay in that groove. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, but there may be some like experimentation going on at the beginning. There's also a couple different testing websites you can use to test your subject line specifically. So one is called subjectline.com, and it actually rates your subject line from 0 to 100. And if you don't get a 100, it'll actually give you suggestions on how to improve your subject line. So that's really helpful. And then the other one is called Test Subject by Zerb. And you put in your from field and your subject line, and it shows you what it looks like on a variety of devices. So you can make sure that your subject line's not getting cut off in a weird spot, and that people can see like the information in the subject line that you want them to see. All right, so now let's talk a little bit more about specific spam triggers in the subject lines, and then more generally in the content. So these are words, symbols, phrases, punctuation in subject lines that can result in an email either getting sent directly to the spam folder and never being seen by your recipient, or being seen by your recipient and they're using their human judgment to decide that it looks spammy and not open it. So either one of those things. So one is overtly promotional language like free or buy it now or something like that. Words like cheap and winner can get it flagged as spam. Of course, all of this is in your handouts. I don't feel like you need to scribble these things down. Use of all caps or multiple exclamation points or question marks. And like I said earlier, ellipses can sometimes flag spam triggers too. Special characters or symbols, like especially multiple in a row like this, would probably get your email flagged as spam. And then there's some other things that don't involve the subject line that still might get you flagged as spam. One is a novel format or design each time. Again, consistency is key to recognizability and to getting through to the inbox and to getting opened. And then too many images. If it's mostly images in your content, or I would say keep it to 20 to 30% of the space is images. So no more than 30%. If it's more than that, then you can get flagged as spam for that. All right, so now let's talk about the from field. I told you that 33% of emails get opened based on the subject line alone. Oh man, we're getting close to the end here, aren't we? Based on the subject line alone. Well, 60% get flagged as spam, or no, 60% of emails get opened based on the from field. And the from field actually can have an impact on being flagged as spam as well. But you want to choose it carefully. Basically, there's two options. You can use your business name, or you can alone, or you can use your name and your business name if you've got one. So my business, Second Read Editing, I could just use that, or I could say Bethany from Second Read Editing. And that second one, I would give a little bit more preference to, because it's personal and it makes them realize that they're getting an email from a person rather than like a company marketing email. Of course, if you are a company, I would still put your name in there if you're the one sending it to personalize it, because it does show that has the preference in terms of open rates. But you definitely want to get your company name in there as well. And avoid no reply email addresses, because that can get flagged as spam. And also you wouldn't be able to get replies. So I don't think any of you would choose to do that, but sometimes it is an option, but it also may not comply with anti-spam regulations.